Hi guys, we're back here so we can have a chat with you about how expensive van life was for us in Sweden. Now, at some point during this video, this set might fall on us because there's a minor wind, and we have a very makeshift sunblock because it took us like 45 minutes to try and do something about the sun. Otherwise, you will not be able to see us at all.
Nonetheless, it is sunny in Britain. We are not complaining. Let's get on with the video.
Ooh, sunny, look, it's sunny. Look, my feet. Sunny.
So we took a 4-week trip throughout Scandinavia. We spent around 2 weeks in Sweden and around 2 weeks in Norway. I think we spent a day longer in Sweden than in Norway, so... Nonetheless, these two videos are a pretty good comparison because we had to drive all the way up through Norway and then we drove all the way back down in about most of it in 2 days down through Sweden. So the fuel in Sweden seems to be either as cheap as the cheapest in Norway or cheaper depending on where you are, but it seems to be more relatively stable across the entire country. Are you listening to me or are you playing with grass?
I am playing with grass. Can't you see?
The fuel prices were all about 15 krona per litre. That's with fuel for diesel and with petrol. They seem to be both the same price, and in all the towns and cities they were the same price everywhere, unless of course you went out in the middle of nowhere, in which case it's more expensive. Now, we spent about 2,700 Swedish krona spent on fuel, and that was driving all the way from the northernmost tip all the way down to the southernmost tip so that we could hand the camper van back.
Precisely. But it actually worked out like way too exactly because we didn't take there too many detours and things like that. Going south because our van was sort of freezing because it got to minus 14, I think actually minus 17 potentially in fuel. And basically the van that was supposed to be a 4-season vehicle was not. And basically there was danger of the pipes breaking, so we had to rocket it down. So literally we can tell you how much it can cost you.
And we also rocketed down because we knew not only is the camper van not really designed for minus 17, but also the gas usage at that temperature would have been horrific.
Yeah, that too.
Now, something that we learned in Sweden, because we'd only replaced gas in Norway at this point, and there all you do is you go to a petrol station and you exchange your empty bottle for a full one for about 25 quid or so. Fair point.
So you would think that, it would be the same thing in its neighboring country, which they're roughly, are very similar in the way they think and etc. and stuff.
No,
of course no. No, that would be too easy.
We went into the petrol station one late night as our gas was running empty and it was coming to minus temperatures. And they said, yeah, sure, that's 529 Swedish krona, please.
Which is like 50 quid or something?
45 pounds.
Yeah.
What? No, I don't want to buy a bottle. I've got an empty bottle. But no. So for some weird law reason,
you have to buy each time you take a bottle back. You don't get anything in return for giving them an empty bottle. They're just gonna take the bottle and charge you anyway.
Yep. So
for the bottle and the gas.
So we made that mistake only once, and then after more research by this very helpful lady at the petrol station, she said to recommend us to go and refill our bottles at these refill stations.
Gasol yeah.
You go to these stations, you take your empty bottle, they fill it up, they weigh how much gas they put in, and you get charged for per kilogram of gas that they put in. And for an 11 kilo bottle, it's only about 250 Swedish krona, about like 20 pounds or so. So yeah, not too much of an issue. That's really distracting.
So we spent about, 800 krona on gas.
Yeah, and if we hadn't made that mistake, it would have been closer to 500 krona, the mistake at the petrol station. But hey ho, you live and learn. At least we get to tell you what to do and what not to do, so you
Precisely.
go and do it.
There's a silver lining in everything.
One thing that wasn't as expensive as it was in Norway were toll roads. Now, in Norway, there were toll roads everywhere. In Sweden, pretty much nowhere. And even if there were toll roads, either they were like turned on and off at like peak times, it seemed, and they were very cheap, only like what, 10 to 20 krona, if that.
For the whole drive down, we probably would not have paid maybe a tenner for all the tolls that we encountered. As soon as you get into the bigger cities, so Stockholm obviously had a bit more tolls entering Stockholm, and then the center had more tolls as well. But as he said, there were actually times, so like they will be on during peak time, and then at night they might not be.
Exactly, and actually all of our tolls for Sweden was actually included in our camper van rental, so technically we spent 0, but I guess if you were to add what we did spend, or what they paid for, I get no more than like 100 kroner, if that. Speaking of the camper van rental, like I said at the beginning, we did spend 4 weeks touring Norway and Sweden and a little bit of Finland in our camper van, and we rented the camper van from Sweden. And also the day before that we rented the camper van, we both test drove a right-hand side drive car because we'd never driven on the right-hand side of the road before. We've only driven in the UK and New Zealand, both drive on the left.
So it makes sense to basically learn a little bit of the basics in a smaller car and not a van.
That only costed about 450 Swedish krona for the whole day. That was for both of us driving, zero excess.
Was that £40 or something?
Yeah, £40 or so. And then the camper van rental, in total, it costed us 20,660 Swedish krona. That was for 30 days.
Hold on. I don't know about you guys, but whenever somebody blasts a string of numbers at me, my brain is like, meep. Nope.
So 20,660 krona for 30 days. That's around 800 krona per day, which is kind of on the cheaper side per day.
And having said so, given that it's that expensive, realistically, what a good alternative might be, so for the more adventurous type person, is to actually purchase a van or basically a big enough vehicle to sleep in and live in for 4 weeks. That is about that price, or maybe a bit cheaper, and then you convert it well enough to basically sleep in it and maybe get a stove. Literally, you can have all your basic essentials for like £100 inside. So like a sleeping bag, a cooking stove, maybe a cheap toilet or a bucket with sawdust or whatever. You can really rough it, and basically for that price, you can buy a piece of junk that still runs, convert it very cheaply, go on your 4-week trip to Norway, and then let the car just die. And then we're about the same cost as that.
And then you don't have to worry about crashing it into rocks or in a fjord or into other people, because rentals will charge you anything for every tiny little scratch and dent, and especially when you have a camper van and everything has to be pristine and working.
Yeah, and because we don't like this sort of pressure of renting that basically going to pick on every single minuscule scratch that they're not going to even fix once they charge you for it.
Now, as we said in our Norway video, we bought all of our food for the entire trip beforehand. We bought it all in the UK because we knew, regardless of how cheap Sweden and Norway were going to be, they're still going to be expensive in relative terms. And I think, well, Sweden was less expensive than Norway, but still more expensive on average than the UK.
Everything was about between 50 pence to £1 more.
The only thing that was about the same price or even cheaper was IKEA. We loved IKEA. We loved IKEA. Actually, quite a lot of the, DIY stores and such all had cafes that sold hot dogs.
It's basically the hot dogs are a thing in Sweden.
Yeah, hot dogs and kundel, those cinnamon buns, kundelbunnen.
Cinnamon buns.
The other thing that we found in Sweden that wasn't in Norway was
Lidl.
A Lidl, which meant that we could have croissants.
It meant that we can have croissants, and we really, really love croissants. Of course, you can buy croissants from other bakers and stuff, but some places basically made them too sweet or too bready.
Croissants are
Lidl
always
get them perfect for us anyway.
So we only spent 750 krona.
I don't know, 60 quid or something?
Yeah, which, for 2 weeks just buying little bits here and there, drinks out every now and then. I think we bought a hot chocolate at one point.
Yeah.
So yeah, just little bits like that. And
it's not that much. And could we have done it with 0? Yes, we could have, because we had all the food in our van.
And we had some left over at the end of our trip.
Yeah, but just because you have it all in the van doesn't mean that you can't indulge here and there a little bit. Parking. Expensive. The end.
We spent 575 krona, or about just under £50 on parking for our 2 weeks in Sweden. Parking's anywhere from 10 to 30 Swedish krona per hour in the city centres. Just like Norway, again, they had these multiple apps that you could use to pay for exactly how long you needed. I explained it in the Norway video, so you can go and check that out. Where is it? This corner. Still, we ended up spending over both the countries about £100 on parking, which is just something you don't really account into your budget for travelling.
Yeah, and the thing is, we were in a van, so we didn't have that many places that we could park. Obviously, the cheaper places would be the multi-story car parks, but we ain't gonna fit in there.
You should also consider where you're going on your route in terms of whether there are going to be ferries. Now, in Norway, this was a big problem for us. We had to check every single little gap to make sure that there wasn't a ferry that we were going to have to pay for. But in Sweden, all the roads seemed to be very well connected, and there weren't any ferries within the country.
Well, that's because there aren't any fjords and the coastline is more intact than the Norwegian one, so that makes sense. So technically we spent 0 on ferries. In terms of camping and sleeping spots, obviously we were in a camper van, so it would suck if we have to basically pay to park it, because then you're paying for this vehicle, this home, to be in it, or you've converted it, so you've already spent money on it, and then it kind of really sucks to basically have to then pay risky rent to park it somewhere. And luckily in the majority of Scandinavia and Sweden especially, the Allemansrätten rules apply, which basically we have a full video on that, which is also here linked to explain exactly what it is and the rules that you have to follow. But essentially for sleeping we did not pay anything because we had the right to wild camp, and as long as we left no trace and were respectful, basically none the wiser.
All the campgrounds that we saw were not cheap campgrounds, anywhere from 200 to 400 Swedish krona a night. And there weren't any, again, like Norway, no like £5 park in a field campsites. They were all expensive with full amenities. Brilliant campsites, but expensive.
Since we didn't actually stay in a campsite, that means that we had to find our own water supply and our own toilet dumps.
The water situation in Sweden was a lot better than it was in Norway, because all of the petrol stations in Sweden had taps, like a little compartment where all the truckers went to go and fill their water tanks.
All the manned, like Circle K and Shell and those ones especially had usually a station with water, with fresh water and a tap, and they usually actually have a hose connection as well. So in terms of showering, that was actually quite freeing, because you can have a 60-liter shower, for the two of us, and
then just go and fill back up with water, at the nearest petrol station, because you knew they would have it.
The toilet dump in Sweden was still a little bit tricky, similar to Norway. A lot of places, especially up north, were getting closed, but then places down south, by the time we got back to Sweden at the end of our trip, were also closing. But nonetheless, there were sort of enough that we could find to basically empty the toilet just, but then we still had to spend maybe half a day to a day looking for one, because they all happened to be shut, which was like annoying. And sometimes the maps that we were using were like, oh, there's a dump here, and then there wasn't. I'm sure during the summer none of these troubles are actually valid. None of these troubles are actually valid during the summer, neither for Sweden nor Norway. So this is just when you're going Northern Lights hunting and you have to be there in the cold, then it's a bit tricky to actually maintain the facilities in your vehicle. So in total we probably spent about 5,000 Swedish krona in terms of that is without the van rental.
That's without the van rental.
That's without the van rental. So basically once you have the van converted stuff and you're only paying for utilities, that is roughly how much the trip cost us. But now with the vehicle
with the vehicle and the car rental for the day that we did, on top of everything else that we spent in Sweden, it was nearer the 26,000 Swedish krona
mark. Which is
what? About £2,300. We classify this trip as more of an investment, because it did give us a lot of opportunity in the physical space of a van, no matter how well or unwell converted it was, for our own van design.
Yeah, because it helped us get a feel for the space and got the creative gears working. We had the opportunity to basically have our tape measure there and actually measure the furniture and space and see how everything interacts with each other.
Exactly.
So it was worth it from that perspective.
And the bonus is we had a decent holiday. We went hiking, we sort of saw the Northern Lights, and we drove all the way up and all the way down.
Great.
Wonderful.
And squawk like headless chickens because we were terrified our pipes are going to freeze. Okay, so our set is about to collapse, so please let us know your experience of how much you spent in Scandinavia and Sweden in particular, because your opinion and experience is invaluable to us. We would like to be very much more prepared whenever we repeat this trip with our own van. Please comment that down below with your amazing stories and subscribe so you don't miss any of our future van build videos. Bye! Oh, concussion time. Concussion.
Okay.
Hello. You did that on purpose.
I did indeed.